had family ties to Britain. Here, students held pro-Palestinian protests, despite the Prime Minister's claim that such action on the anniversary of October 7th is un-British. It's less than a week since the attack on Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester. And as the people affected mark this anniversary, some are questioning their future in this country.
We can't even get a break on that one day to actually grieve and process our feelings. And it's actually really hurtful.
Also tonight, one of the killers of Stephen Lawrence discusses his murder publicly for the first time. Stephen was killed in 1993, but David Norris was not convicted until 2011. Now he's being considered for parole. Today, he said he is deeply sorry, but he won't discuss the other suspects for fear of endangering his family. Plus, Robert Jenrick stands by leaked comments in which he called Handsworth in Birmingham one of the worst integrated places he had ever visited, with no white faces. I'm going to speak to the Mayor of the West Midlands. And why car owners could be in for a windfall as the watchdog announces compensation for millions of unfair finance deals. All that to come, and much more on the UK Tonight. We start tonight's programme with events in Israel, a country remembering 1,200 people killed in the Hamas massacre on this day in 2023. It was the worst atrocity against Jewish people since the Holocaust, with hundreds more people taken hostage, many of them dying in captivity. Among the dead, 18 people from the UK, and many more of the victims had loved ones here. Let's bring you the scene in Tel Aviv tonight. Israelis gathering to remember the victims of October 7th, as well as the hostages still being held in Gaza. The attack on October 7th sparked the war in Gaza, in which 67,000 people are believed to have died. And the UN says there is a famine in Gaza City. The conflict has provoked angry protests here in the UK, and those continued today, despite the Prime Minister suggesting demonstrations on this anniversary would be un-British. Sky's social affairs correspondent Becky Johnson has this report.
October the 7th in London, a chant viewed by many as a highly offensive anti-Semitic call for the destruction of Israel. To these protesters, a legitimate call for a free Palestine. Demos went ahead despite the Prime Minister urging people not to take part on the anniversary of the Hamas attack that killed around 1,200 people. Keir Starmer said it was un-British to have so little respect.
The Prime Minister suggests it's un-British to be at this protest on October the 7th. Do you agree with him?
I don't agree with him because it's not un-British to exercise our right to protest, our freedom of expression.
Is this disrespectful, though, to people mourning the loss of life on October the 7th 2 years ago?
It's not disrespectful. It's not a denial of the Holocaust, not a denial of Jewish identity.
Do you condemn what Hamas did on October the 7th?
I don't care for that question.
This man appeared to be an organiser, but didn't want to give us his name.
Are you an organiser?
Thank you for asking. You want to know what I think?
Yeah.
I think the Prime Minister is disrespectful to the thousands of Palestinians who are killed every single day in Gaza. That's what I think.
We love Jewish people.
I love Jewish people.
We hate Zionists.
The war could end today, but Hamas have refused.
This Jewish man came here to share his anger. He told me he feels unsafe in London at the moment.
The war could stop.
Un-British behaviour, as Keir Starmer very Britishly put it. Okay, these people should be under arrest for incitement. They could do this October 5th, October 6th, October 8th, October 9th. In fact, they probably are, and they pretty much have done every day, just as they did on October 7th, 2023. Okay, and to do this today is mere incitement. But Sky have also been inciting, okay, and you only have permission to publish this if you include that.
There was hostility towards the media on both sides.
Please don't get in the faces of protesters. But they're on a public street in London?
It's common decency, don't get in their face.
So the Prime Minister says that this shows a lack of respect and is un-British. Do you agree with him?
I've said we're not going to give comment to Zionist newspapers.
You're disgusting.
I think condoning genocide is disgusting.
Oh,
This video from North London was circulating on social media. A woman cutting down ribbons put up for the Israelis still being held hostage in Gaza.
these protests are now raising serious questions. Where is the line between legitimate demonstration over the war in Gaza and anti-Semitism? And what is acceptable on the streets of Britain?
If this is un-British, what can the British government do about it? Becky Johnson, Sky News, Central London.
Meanwhile, one of the men injured in the Manchester Synagogue attack says he feels so unsafe he no longer wants to live here in the UK. Yoni Finlay's ex-wife, Naomi, has been visiting him in hospital since last week along with their children. She's told Sky News that the attack and the reaction to it means he's questioning his future here. Sky's Katie Barnfield has this report.
Injured, protecting others. Yoni Finlay was struck by a police bullet while barricading the doors of the Heaton Park Synagogue during last week's terror attack. His ex-wife and the mother of his children says he now feels so unsafe he wants to leave.
Yoni's expressed to me that he definitely no longer feels safe in this country and is beginning to question his future here. When I went to see him in the hospital, I spoke to him about some of the anti-Semitism we'd faced personally. We've been shouted at in our own home. My kids have been shouted at. My son, who's 16, his biggest fear is anybody finding out he's Jewish.
On the day of the attack, Yoni spent 7 hours in surgery. Naomi says he's in severe pain, but is now stable and recovering. He was hit as police shot and killed the attacker, Jihad al-Shami, outside the synagogue doors. Yoni's family were just a few doors away when the attack began.
The second I heard something, I knew. I knew what it was.
When did you find out that Yoni was involved?
We found out from a family member who was in the synagogue. They came to tell us that he'd been injured and taken straight to hospital. It was really difficult for the kids. I feel like the beginning of the day before that, where we're just on the streets, just asking anyone, have you seen him, have you seen him, have you seen him, was definitely the hardest part.
2 years to the day from the October 7th terror attack in Israel, pro-Palestine marches are being organised across the country, including in Manchester. Naomi feels the demonstrations are disrespectful to victims of the synagogue attack.
Even today, there's protests going on one of the saddest days for Jewish people worldwide. And I feel like we can't even get a break on that one day to actually grieve and process our feelings. And it's actually really hurtful.
Although she's praised the police response since the attack, Naomi worries for her and Yoni's children what will happen when the attention dies down.
We worry that in a few weeks, when all this simmers down, are we still going to feel reassured? Are we still going to be protected? You know, who's going to look after our kids when they're in school? Who's going to look after us when we go pray in the synagogue? You know, who's going to protect us?
Katie Barnfield, Sky News in Manchester.
I'm joined now in the studio by Adam Ma'ani. His cousin Hashi witnessed his daughter's murder on October the 7th. Sahi taken hostage and died in captivity. Adam, thank you so much for coming into the studio to talk to us on this second anniversary. Your reflections today?
It's a really difficult day for our family. You know, 2 years ago, my 18-year-old cousin Mayan was murdered in our home. She just had celebrated her 18th birthday only 4 days earlier. So the balloons from her birthday party were still up in the house. And the terrorists came in, they shot through the door and they shot her in the head. And my cousin Tahi had to watch his firstborn daughter die in his arms. They took the rest of the family out of the bomb shelter and forced Gali, Mayan's mother, to unlock her phone so that they could live stream the family's horror and perpetuate more terror for the wider family. And that's how most of my family members actually found out.
Because they saw it on her social media.
They saw it on her social media, on her Facebook live stream. Gali never live streamed, so it was a very odd thing, and everyone who was on Facebook at the time was like, what's this? And then saw it. In the clips from that video went viral on that day. A lot of people know my family from those clips. They remember the boy, Shachar, 9 years old, sobbing uncontrollably, having just seen his firstborn daughter murdered in front, his elder sister murdered in front of him. And then Yaeli, the 11-year-old, was bravely trying to explain to the terrorist WAC who they were trying to shush him because they were using our house as a base to go hunt everyone else around in the community. And they were trying to shush him, and Yaeli says to them in English, his sister, you killed his sister. And the terrorist replies in English, she's with your God now. And that clip is how a lot of people know my family. It was one of the earliest clips that came out of the massacre, and a lot of people were very concerned for the welfare of the children. Fortunately, those children are safe. But Tzachi, my cousin, was taken hostage with the blood of his firstborn soaked into his skin and clothes from trying to resuscitate her. And Frog marched into Gaza with our neighbor Omri. We fought hard as we can to try to get Tzachi home. We had signs of life. He was paraded on a Hamas video, propagandized with the red triangle, the inverted red triangle that we see now tonight on the streets of our cities and campuses. And we saw that as signs of life, so it gave us hope, but we couldn't succeed. He came home to us this year at the tail end of the hostage deal, of the Phase 1 hostage deal.
You didn't know whether he would come out alive or
I didn't know.
Deceased.
We left this country on a flight that week to join with the rest of our family to receive him. And we didn't know if we would be joining a family reunion or a funeral. And it was only mid-air that my wife had an instinct to check the Wi-Fi and log on and see what was news. And that's when we heard that it was confirmed that he came back in a box, in a coffin. And when we landed, they were still not able to completely verify his identity. The week before, if you remember, Shiri Bibas and the two youngest hostages, Ariel and Kfir, 9-month-old baby and 4-year-old boy, were returned in coffins. And Shiri's body was not in it. It was a Palestinian woman whose name we still don't know. And we hoped that maybe Hamas was playing more psychological tricks on us, like they did that week. Unfortunately, after 12 hours and 3 different forensics exams, because his body was so mutilated and tortured and abused that they didn't have much to work with, eventually they found enough to positively identify him. We buried Tzachi next to his firstborn daughter, Mayan. And we grieved and sobbed and wept for days, and then we picked ourselves up and we dusted ourselves off and we continued to campaign for the rest of the hostages. Our neighbor Omri was taken along with Tzachi. He has 2 small children. At the time, they were 1 and 3. He was wrenched away from them with his wife, Lishai, holding the children, and he still lives, we believe. He's still one of the 48. And the children kiss his poster, his hostage poster, goodnight. They know him more as a poster than a person in the flesh. And we want to, it would be some kind of resolution for us as a family. We've become so attached to all of the hostage family stories, to be able to bring Omri home to his family.
You don't just remember your family and the other family members of those. As you said, you've become this big group that share this same lived horror experience.
That's right.
And it's not just on the anniversary that you remember every day. I know you live in East Sussex in Brighton, and there's a memorial there.
Yeah.
And every day, an individual affected by the horror of October the 7th is remembered, and that is important to you because these aren't just numbers,
That's
these
right.
hostages. These are real people, and it doesn't matter whether you're Jewish or Palestinian, wherever you are from in the world, you are a person in your own right. That is so important for you, and that's why you wanted to come in today. And I really appreciate you reliving this story. I know you've done it a number of times, but for the reason of putting a human face on this horror.
Well, absolutely, and you nailed it. You know, we set up the memorial in Brighton precisely because we wanted to humanize every single victim, and it didn't matter who they were, what background they had. You know, at the moment, there's hostages like Mohammed al-Atrash, who's dead, whose body is being held hostage by Hamas. He's an Israeli Arab. We fight for him. We fight for Bipin Joshi, a Nepalese student who came to learn how to do agriculture on the kibbutz in the community that my family lived. We have Tanzanian Joshua Molel, who was there for the same reason. So it's really important that we remind people of just all the names, all of their stories, all of the human beings, the 1,200 who were murdered on that day. And we've committed to doing that for each and every individual. Sometimes it's whole families that were murdered, like the Quds family, who on Simchat Torah, a joyous celebration of a Jewish festival, on that day of October 7th, were preparing to do a kite festival for peace. That was their thing as a family, and they did it every year, and they were renowned for it. And they would fly kites along the Gaza border with messages of peace for their neighbors. A lot of the communities were there for that reason. And that entire family were murdered on October 7th. Hamas didn't just kill 1,200 people. They didn't just kidnap 251. They also murdered the prospects for peace in its bed before it could even get its slippers on.
Your memorial in Brighton has been attacked a number of times since you put it there and started this. And we saw what happened in Manchester at the Synagogue last week, again, another attack on British Jews. What does it feel like to live in the UK at the moment as a British Jew? As I said, at one end you have an attack on a synagogue, a loss of British Jews because simply they are Jewish and living in Britain, and then you have your memorial attacked repeatedly. How does it feel to you to live in the UK at the moment? Because I spoke to so many members of the Jewish community over the course of last week who are questioning whether to stay in the UK, who say every day they live in fear of something like this happening. Last week was their worst fear realised.
It's palpable. It's febrile at the moment, but it was even after the October 7th massacre. That very evening, there were celebrations in Acton. The next day in Brighton, the city centre, Palestine Solidarity Campaign had a rally where a speaker praised the October 7th massacre. I was still finding out details about how many dead relatives I have. And she was exuberant. She was talking about her joy, how it was a success and beautiful. And she even knew that there was violence involved. It wasn't denial. She just called it revolutionary violence. She said revolutionary violence is not terrorism. That was in the streets 5 minutes away from my house. And that's when I knew that there was a very powerful dehumanization campaign, this complete lack of compassion and empathy. And we're seeing it today in the streets around the country. And it's that very dehumanization that allows people to become so hateful, so extreme, and enables people to kill Jews with impunity. I stood, after that attack in Manchester in Heaton Park, I stood outside my synagogue in Brighton wearing a stab vest, protecting my community, because I'm a community security trust volunteer. And within about 2 hours after the attack, someone drove by and shouted baby killers at us.
You'll have seen Becky Johnson's report earlier in the programme, our first report tonight, about the protests that are happening involving students in London and other cities in the UK today. And there was a clear plea from the Prime Minister and the Jewish community that not to hold them today. There is a right to protest. We know what they're protesting for, but today is about the attack on Jews. And it was seen as, you label it however you want, un-British, insensitive, inappropriate, but there was a call for them not to protest today. How do you feel that so many did feel that it was okay to protest today, not keep it till tomorrow?
Well, first of all, I think it's a bit almost impotent to see our political leaders, our government, our police forces basically begging for protests not to happen when, you know, it just feels like they feel as powerless as the rest of us. And that's a very distressing situation to be in when you're a minority. We're only 0.5% of the population. We don't have, you know, we have community security trust. We have our own kind of security efforts as best we can, but we do rely on our institutions to protect us. And so that is a bit of a, that does actually cause more anxiety to see that they themselves feel powerless. The second is, I think that I'm really worried about again, the dehumanization, but also the sort of misinformation that people are like on the streets, not just misinformed, but willfully ignorant, like not wanting to engage.
Refusing to denounce on camera what happened on October the 7th, reluctant to do that. Denial
that it even happened. I mean, Hamas had, the terrorists had GoPro cameras on. They wanted the world to see what they were doing. They forced Gali to unlock her phone so that they can live stream it all. I mean, we have visuals, we have video, it's undisputable what happened. And yet, they still want to deny it because I think they don't want to allow themselves to see us as human beings. They need to dehumanize us. One of the members of the flotilla, who is herself a Holocaust denier on record and was released after she tried to, you know, get into Gaza and failed and was sent back. She was in Turkey giving an interview where she was talking about how Israelis are not humans. They have faces and hands like us, but they are not humans. And I was really glad that she said it. And I'm really glad that people can see what they're doing today on the streets, because when people show you who they are, believe them. And second, I do welcome the efforts to try to change the legislation. It's not a draconian measure.
Take into account the cumulative effect, because, you know, the language used, the accusation is it can be inciting hatred, but also inciting violence, and that is the real concern here about the escalation of what is happening.
I mean, we see the glorification of Hamas on our streets. It's a proscribed terrorist organization. We need concrete action. It's terrifying for a community that has just experienced the worst attack against British Jews in modern history on our soil here in the UK. And for people like the 16 British victims who were caught up in the October 7th massacre, my friends Lisa and Mike Marlowe are currently in the site at Nova where their son was murdered. He was a security guard, a volunteer security guard, and he saved lives that day, and he was murdered. And they wanted to be near the site because that's the closest they can be to their precious boy. And people on the streets here are cheerleading for the murderers. Yeah. They're cheerleading for the murderers of my 18-year-old cousin. They're cheerleading for the murderers of my precious cousin Tahi, who I grew up with, and we used to argue about bands and play football together and eat sabra and just have a whole future ahead of us. And I still hold on to those memories because I don't want to think about what happened to him.
Yeah. You can stand against what is happening in Gaza, but without the scenes perhaps that we are seeing. I think that's something that people want to make clear because, you know, the protests, what they're doing and how they're making British Jews feel. You know, you can argue there's another way, but...
We've tried appealing.
Yeah.
I've tried appealing to the local Palestine solidarity groups when they formed up next to our memorial. They used to never form up there, but as soon as we had the memorial, they started to form up their protests there. And we begged, we pleaded, we asked them to not canvass. Nothing worked. They don't care. In fact, they deliberately want to taunt us. They want us to be upset. They think they get a joy out of it. There's a certain pleasure in provoking Jews in this country. People really kind of enjoy it. And I think there's something very disturbing about that. But also I think it reminds me of something Martin Luther King said, legislation may not change the heart, but it could restrain the heartless.
Adam, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us about your family, because, you know, at the heart of what today is about is remembering those lives lost. And thank you for commenting on what we're seeing on the streets today. I really appreciate your time, thank you, and I wish you and your family well, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Adam. Still to come here on the UK tonight, one of Stephen Lawrence's killers has been speaking publicly for the first time since his murder 32 years ago. We'll have the latest from the parole hearing of David Norris. Stay with us.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Hello and welcome back. Now, one of the men jailed for the killing of Stephen Lawrence has asked for his family's forgiveness at his first parole hearing. David Norris said he wanted to express his genuine remorse for the crime as he spoke publicly for the first time about his involvement in the murder back in 1993. Stephen Lawrence was killed in a racially motivated attack by a gang 32 years ago, but only 2 of his killers have ever faced justice. David Norris making his case for release in a public parole board hearing 13 years after being handed a life sentence for that racist attack. Despite today's apology, he has refused to reveal who else was involved in Stephen Lawrence's death. Well, Sky's Alice Porter joins me now. And Alice, the name Stephen Lawrence woven into the fabric of British society, but this case was such a long time ago. It's worth going over where we find ourselves at now, because we know he was attacked by a gang, but only a couple of people have gone to prison. So just remind us of the facts of the case.
Of course. Well, up until very recently, David Norris had always denied any involvement with Stephen Lawrence's murder. And this year, for the first time, he admitted to not only being there when he was killed, he admitted to taking part in the attack in terms of punching Stephen Lawrence multiple times. But crucially, he always has said that he was not the one who wielded the knife. So the question is, who did? And after more than 30 years, we still don't know the answer to that question. Now, 2 people have been sentenced for the murder, but police believe there were 6 people who took part in the attack, and the other suspects, including the persons who inflicted the fatal stab wounds, have never been convicted. Now, for the family, this has been a long fight to try and get justice. There was huge criticisms of the police's initial handling of the investigation, so much so that it sparked an inquiry, and the Macpherson report found the Metropolitan Police institutionally racist. And it took an incredible 19 years after Stephen Lawrence's murder for David Norris and Gary Dobson to be both jailed for life. Now, the minimum term that Norris had to serve has now expired, so now the parole board are faced with the decision of either keeping him in a closed prison, moving him to an open prison, or releasing him. Now, it's not for the parole board to conduct some sort of retrial. They have to decide whether he poses a risk to the public. Now, the parents of Stephen Lawrence, needless to say, are very much hope the parole board do not release David Norris at all. And particularly today, we've heard from the father of Stephen Lawrence. He says justice will not have been served if Norris is released without naming those people, those other suspects in the case who inflicted the fatal stab wounds. This is what he had to say.
The main things I want to hear from him is the names of the other boys. That was the other 4 boys that's still alive and walking up and down all over the place. For him to name them, and then hopefully see if the police can then arrest them and charge them for murder and send them to prison as the place that they should have been.
Stephen Lawrence's dad there. David Norris giving his own account publicly today at this parole hearing. What is it he had to say then?
Yeah, this is the first time we've heard from him publicly, and he's today refused to name the person who killed Stephen Lawrence. In a public hearing, he appeared via a video link from a prison. We don't know which prison. His back was to the camera, and he read a letter out, and these are some extracts from it. He said, "They were only trying to make their way home, and everyone, regardless of what age or race they may be, should be able to go about their business safely. I was a 16-year-old, horrible, violent, racist young man who had come so far off the rails that there was a high possibility I might never be on the right track." He also told the hearing, "I'm not here to discuss other people. I'm here to take responsibility for my part in what happened, my actions." He later added, "In an ideal world, I could tell the whole truth of my part and others. I can't give them everything they wish, as it would pose a risk to me and my family." So there Norris is making it very clear that he knows who is responsible, but he is unwilling to provide that information in this public hearing today, which would, of course, be really devastating to the parents of Stephen Lawrence, who have been campaigning for decades, really, and still, after all this time, have no answers. That parole hearing will go on for a couple of days, and we understand that the government has opposed David Norris's bid for release.
OK, Alice, thank you. Alice Porter there with the details of that parole hearing for one of the men involved in the murder of Stephen Lawrence. Thanks, Alice. Now, the Shadow Justice Secretary has today defended comments he made earlier this year, which critics say stirred racial division. On a visit to the Handsworth area of Birmingham, Robert Jenrick complained of not seeing another white face. His comments were revealed in a leaked recording obtained by The Guardian.
The other thing that I noticed there was that it was one of the worst integrated places that I've ever been to. In fact, in the hour and a half that I was filming with news there, I didn't see another white face. And that's not the kind of country I want to live in. I want to live in a country where people are properly integrated. It's not about the colour of your skin or your faith. Of course it isn't. But I want people to be living alongside each other, not parallel lives.
I do wonder what integrated means for you, and I wonder how you can judge that a person is integrated by the colour of their skin, being there for 90 minutes.
Well, look, I was very clear that it's not about the colour of your skin or the faith.
You didn't see any white faces, and that's what made you feel like it wasn't integrated.
The point that I was making is we want all people to be living side by side. We can't have particular communities in this country where there's a heavy preponderance of one group or another.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Mayor of the West Midlands, Richard Parker, who criticised Robert Jenrick's comments.
I was shocked. I was disappointed. I thought they were disgraceful comments, and they're really damaging comments about, one of the great communities in Birmingham and Handsworth, a community that is vibrant, is very welcoming, very hospitable, and full of generosity.
He's doubled down on those comments today. He was interviewed on Sky News saying, look, I'm not going to shy away from talking about division. Handsworth is the worst integrated place he had ever been to. He stands by that comment.
He doesn't know Handsworth. If he wanted to know Handsworth, he could have reached out to me and I could have shown him around and introduced him to the great people there, the great people that run businesses I know there, and some of the great community groups that I know there. Just a few Sundays ago, I visited the Soho Bid. That's a group of business people that drive businesses on the Soho Road, one of the most vibrant high streets in Birmingham and the West Midlands. And I also helped out on the Sunday at Sikh Soup Kitchen. Fantastic community support there, a great community that's really supporting the most vulnerable in Birmingham and the West Midlands. It's not... Robert Jenrick's comments weren't reflective of a community I know and a community that's always welcomed me, and they are really, really damaging. He used the colour of people's skins to make really divisive and negative comments about Handsworth, and it's wrong. And it's also wrong that a politician, a senior politician of a mainstream party, makes comments like this and then reiterates them with no apology. I believe Robert Jenrick and the leader of the Conservative Party owe the people of Birmingham and the people in the communities of Handsworth an apology.
The context of this, he was in Handsworth for around 90 minutes, we understand, actually making a film about litter. And he said it's the closest to a slum that he has seen in the UK. He talked about segregation, and he talked about Handsworth being ghettoised. The Tory leader rejected the idea that his comments were divisive and racist. In fact, Kemi Badenoch said he was entitled to make an observation.
Some big questions need to be asked. Why Robert Jenrick, of all the communities in the West Midlands or all the places in Birmingham, he'd choose Handsworth? Why he chose Handsworth to make a story about litter, and then why he used the colour of many of the people that live there to make comments about one of our most important and inclusive and vibrant inner city communities. And I think I'm shocked and appalled that a mainstream politician is making comments about that, a place he doesn't know, a Westminster politician arriving in a city like Birmingham to make a story, and a negative story about one of the key communities in Birmingham. And serious questions, I think, now need to be asked about whether a mainstream political party should have people elected in Parliament that use the words and describe communities like Handsworth in the way he did. I'm also really concerned that he made those comments at a fundraising speech at a Conservative Party constituency fundraiser, at which senior Conservative members and possibly the local MP also attended. The fact that those people attending it didn't challenge Robert Jenrick or call him out is equally disappointing. And I think the leader of the Conservative Party has got some very serious and significant questions to answer.
Would you invite Robert Jenrick back to Handsworth to see the real Handsworth? What would you show him to show integration?
I've said previously when he made films at Birmingham that I welcome into my office and I can tell him a very different story about our wonderful communities, and I'll be very happy to take him on a tour of Handsworth. I will be there on Friday afternoon, meeting, greeting many of the communities there, visiting the businesses there, and I know I'll be met with a very warm welcome. And I believe, irrespective of the comments that Robert Jenrick has made, he would be too. And and I would show them the real place, the real people, and the real communities that make Handsworth such a successful place, and the communities so supporting and so generous.
Why do you think he's made these comments about Birmingham? Why has he singled out Birmingham? What do you think's going on here?
I think you'll need to ask Robert Jenrick that rather than myself. But look, I believe that he's now using language and creating a narrative that is divisive. Its focus is on trying to reveal or provoke vulnerabilities rather than focus on our possibilities, and he wants to do damage to the most important values that we hold in this country, about the importance of supporting our communities, around community cohesion, and ensure all members of our communities feel safe here, feel welcome here, and are supported here.
Some breaking news for you now. You may remember this story from a couple of weeks ago, a cyber attack on a group of nurseries called Kiddo. The Metropolitan Police are saying they have arrested 2 men on suspicion of computer misuse and blackmail. This is after the cyber attack on a chain of London-based nurseries. You may remember the hackers took pictures and personal details of children at these nurseries, some of which we understand were published on the dark web. The names of around 8,000 children from that nursery chain taken, and a ransom was demanded. Well, we now understand that the Metropolitan Police have arrested 2 men, aged 17 and 22. It's after a police operation at a number of properties in Bishop Stortford in Hertfordshire today. Just looking at the information coming into us, they are saying that we understand reports of this nature can cause considerable concern, especially to parents and carers who may be worried about the impact of such an incident on them and their families. The Metropolitan Police saying we want to reassure the community and anyone affected that this matter continues to be taken extremely seriously. These arrests are a significant step forward in our investigation, but our work continues alongside our partners to ensure those responsible are brought to justice. So that's the Metropolitan Police arresting 2 men after that cyber attack on a chain of London nurseries. Now, a story that broke earlier on today, the finance regulator saying millions of motorists who were treated unfairly when signing up to car finance schemes should receive hundreds of pounds in compensation. The Financial Conduct Authority said it is now consulting on the plan to offer payments to customers with agreements that were taken out between 2007 and 2024. It's quite a large period of time. Let's bring in our business correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, who's across the details of this. Now, this dropped earlier on this afternoon. A lot of traffic on our website looking at the details, because, as I said, it's a big chunk of time, and many people have taken out finance agreements on cars.
Yeah, and this is a really long-running saga. It's been in and out of the courts. Most recently, the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, had it say it's legally knotty, but it matters to a lot of people. Yeah. And in its simplest form, this is all about providing some compensation for people who bought cars on finance, but ended up paying a higher interest rate on their loans than they should have done, because the brokers who were selling them the cars but also arranging the loan, behind the scenes were being incentivised by the banks to get the highest interest rate out of them that they could. So that's what happened. Okay. And in 2021, the FCA outlawed this practice. It's called discretionary commission arrangements, DCAs for short. And since then, the whole kind of underbelly, the whole underworld of hidden commissions has been sort of picked over and taken to the courts, etc., like I mentioned. But now we're at a point where the FCA is ready to provide some redress to these people. And it's published this guidance, this consultation that will now go out to consultation, this document. And it's looking at a few things. So, firstly, how much compensation should these people receive, and how do we calculate that compensation? And it's actually kind of come to a sort of interim decision, which is that 14 million people could be eligible. Wow. But they might receive around £700 each on average. And that could cost the banks, when you add in all the kind of administrative costs on top of the compensation, about £11 billion. And this is assuming about 85% of people apply, which is where they think the figure is. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, but it's actually not as high as some of the earlier estimates, which had the figure at potentially £9 to £18 billion in compensation, around £900 each. So there'll be some consumer groups who aren't so happy about this. But they're the kind of figures we're looking at.
And then we also have time limitations. So as you mentioned just there, it starts going back to 2007. That was a long time ago. And actually some of the banks have said in the run-up to this, we don't keep documents that long. We normally delete them after about 6 years.
Yeah.
So
and I wonder if people who had the car finance agreements have even got those documents anymore.
And actually that's a bit controversial because some banks might think that they're going to get unfairly penalised for keeping documents when others destroyed them. So we'll have to see kind of how that all comes out in the wash. I mentioned that this is just one stage of the process. This is now going out to consultation, and assuming things go to plan, people could start receiving payments next year, so in 2026. But it's a big but, it's a big assumption because, and the FCA has actually warned about this, that the fear is that some banks may seek to hold up the process, some may appeal it, some may seek judicial reviews. So, you know, while the FCA and I think a lot of interested parties want to draw a line under this, I don't think we're quite there yet.
OK. Gurpreet, a lot of people will be wondering how they find out if they're eligible for this. Is that detail still to come?
Yeah, there are details to come. The FCA has told banks that they should proactively approach people who might be eligible, but people can also write in to find out themselves.
OK, Gurpreet, thank you, Gurpreet Nawal. As I said, that story doing a lot of traffic on the Sky News website today. Thank you very much. Coming up on the UK Tonight, we're going to hear from the RNLI as they release dramatic footage of a riptide rescue in Porthcawl and how England survived a shock at the Women's Cricket World Cup. All the details on the way.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok.
These slums, once gripped by fear and death.
There is far less bloodshed now, but it hasn't gone away.
Who's asking you to kill?
The police will give me the orders, and after I kill the target, I throw the gun away.
We try our best to uncover and unpick a fast-changing and deeply complex region.
These large waterways provided an excellent source of body disposal.
This is the Buriganga River, where victims who'd allegedly been shot dead were dumped.
Sheikh Hasina, how confident are you that she will stand trial?
She will stand trial, there's no doubt about that.
We're going to take you to the very heart of a criminal network, going undercover inside Southeast Asia's scam centres for the very first time.
We won't have any problems with police, it's okay. Just seen Imran Khan leave, and as we understand it, he's just been shot in the leg.
They have decided that the only way they'll allow elections is if I'm inside jail or killed.
Sky News get the full story first.
Chinese vessels start encircling the boat we're on, blocking its path.
The Chinese are now deploying water cannons, firing it directly towards our boat. We've discovered doctors across Delhi dishing out pills like this, claiming they will provide a lifelong cure for homosexuality.
Rohingya people fleeing an escalating civil war.
The situation here in Cox's is desperate. An already insecure place does feel a lot more precarious.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force. It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
David is here with the sport. 2 nights in a row with you. What a treat.
Thanks very much. Feelings mutual, SJ.
Oh, good. Well, we're coming up to Halloween, so we should talk about scares. There was a bit of a scare in the cricket in the Women's World Cup.
I see what you've done there, yes. So England played South Africa in their first game at the Cricket World Cup, won by 10 wickets. Easy enough. This was very different against an opponent they were expected to beat, and that is Bangladesh. They bowled very well, I have to say. So Sophie Eccleston, Charlie Dean, Alice Capsey, Lindsay Smith, all spinners, took 9 of the 10 wickets to fall. Bangladesh 178 all out. So England needing 179 to win in 50 overs. However, then the scare. They were 69 for 2, but lost Nat Sivabrant. Here's Sophia Dunkley going for a duck. She lasted just 3 balls, and then the next to go, Emma Lamb. Oh, great celebration, by the way. Emma Lamb scored just 1 run, took 12 balls to do it, and then did this. So England suddenly 69 for 2 to 78 for 5. But then it was all on Heather Knight. Now, listen, Heather Knight had the England captaincy. England suffered a humiliating loss in the Women's Ashes. They lost the series to India, so a lot of pressure on Heather Knight to try and hold England steady, and she managed to do that. In the end, 79 not out, guiding England to victory. And she'd had a very sort of scratchy start. First 50 balls, just 15 runs, but then managed to get flowing. And she managed to get England over the line, eventually getting the victory in the 47th over. So what looked like a straightforward task became a difficult one, but this is important for Heather Knight because of all that pressure she suffered. There was this sort of like image of her slumped really after the Ashes, lost 16-0 because it's a points-based Women's Ashes. This is, I think, a start of the return to form, not burdened by the captaincy. Yeah. England are 2 wins from 2, and then they've got Sri Lanka on Saturday in Colombo. So hopefully they've got over that sort of early scare, and they can move on in the tournament.
She needed that, England needed that.
Yes.
More of the same, please.
Yes, we shall see how they progress in that next game. OK, so that's as far as England cricket is concerned. Let's talk to you about women's football, especially the Champions League tonight.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
The club made a great pitch to me, that they wanted me. They gave me a 4-year contract. All the stops were out. They made me feel really welcome.
We arrived at the airport there in Madrid, and there were 30, 40, 50 journalists, cameras, and we thought, oh, they come for this movie star, you know. Suddenly we see, Jesus Christ, Jimmy, it's for you.
It's always difficult losing a great player. Jimmy, for me, was always a world-class striker. Probably not talked about as much, I don't think, as to some of the other great strikers, but I was fortunate enough to play with him.
We obviously made a very good profit on him. If you just take the business transaction, not the football emotion, the transaction was a good deal because we bought him for 2 and we sold him for £12 million.
In 2 years.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Right, let's tell you about the heroes at the RNLI. The group has released footage of the moment they had to rescue a surfer in Porthcawl who'd been dragged out to sea by a riptide. The video released by the RNLI shows the crew in South Wales racing to the scene to pull Ben Fraser from the water. The 30-year-old had become stranded in choppy water in gale-force winds when he was spotted by a dog walker who called 999. The RNLI say the incident shows that even the most experienced swimmers or surfers can get into trouble in the water. Well, let's speak to one of the wonderful volunteers at the RNLI, Gareth Collins. Gareth, hello to you. Take me back to Wednesday night, 3 weeks ago, when you were on a training exercise.
Yeah, so we were there, standard Wednesday evening training, and the pages went off. And sometimes they go for a test on a Wednesday. But we all looked around and realised it wasn't a test. So we thought, right, it's launch. I looked around and I realised I was the helm. So it was my job on that day to be in command of the boat and make sure that the rescue went ahead. So we get the crew together, choose the crew. We're told what the shout's going to be. In this case, surfer swept out by the tide. And then we launch and we crack on.
Yeah, you crack on, you take it all in your stride, but obviously, like you said, you're out training all the time, preparing for any eventuality. What was this particular rescue like? How challenging was it?
So It was a rough day. There's no doubt about that. It was windy. It was rough. The sea wasn't enormous, but it was sizable, and it was quite confused. So waves coming from multiple different directions. Fortunately, the shout was quite close to the lifeboat station. It was in an area we knew well, so we had no trouble knowing where we were going, etc. So yeah, the biggest challenge was making best speed while keeping the crew safe and the boat safe, given the conditions.
Yeah, of course. And that eagle-eyed dog walker on the beach spotting Ben the surfer. I mean, you know, that's the first part of the rescue operation and them doing their bit. You then spring into action. The surfer, Ben, was about 200 metres from the shoreline. The conditions, you know, choppy seas, grey conditions, how difficult is he to spot? Because obviously, you know, that's your concern. You know roughly where you're heading, but it must be a confusing, chaotic picture.
Yeah, well, Ben was great, actually. He did a lot of things right. He sat up on his board. He was waving his hands. The video showing him there lying down after he's noticed we have seen him. But he was doing exactly the right thing. He wasn't trying to get back to shore in a treacherous location. He was making sure he was visible, and the crew were able to spot him quite easily, thanks to his efforts as well.
Well, do you know what, Gareth? I can spot Ben from where I am now. I'm pleased to say he joins us. And Ben, I think you've got a big thank you to say to Gareth, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. The crew were amazing. Very and made me feel very much and made their evening more difficult. So I really appreciate that.
Oh. And Ben, it just goes to show, doesn't it? You're an experienced surfer, but even the most experienced swimmer, surfer, paddleboarder can get caught out, right?
Yeah, 100%. I really didn't think that the evening was going to go that direction when I went out. So it was definitely an experience and one I have learned from and just appreciate that the RNLI were on hand and were so kind and helpful. So really appreciate that.
Oh, well, listen, Ben, you're safe and well, a more reliable... Well, is it a more reliable form of transport, the train you're on at the moment? Ben, we really appreciate your time. And Gareth, you don't release these videos to show what heroes you are at the RNLI. It's all for education and just to remind people how treacherous conditions can be, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. I mean, Ben's a prime example. And equally, Ben did a lot of things right on that day. He had the right kit on. He told someone where he was going, when he was going. And as I said previously, he knew what to do when he got in trouble.
OK, well, listen, Gareth, thank you so much for coming on. Gareth, the volunteer at the RNLI, and Ben, the surfer, who is safe and well tonight. Thanks so much for joining us on the UK Tonight.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.